All right, thank you all. I can still see folks trickling in, but we're going to get started here. Bert, I believe you're on the line, so would you like to kick us off with some opening remarks?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. Apologies, little technology issues this morning. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. My name is Roberta Loretti Bernhardt. I'm the Vice President for Programs at Food Enterprise Solutions, and I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. Small and medium enterprises in many emerging economies play a very important role in the agri-food systems. They provide employment opportunities as well as a source of foods for rural as well as urban consumers. Many of these businesses are connected to supply chains serving global export markets as well. SMEs help to transform food systems by providing nutritious foods, reducing post-harvest loss and waste, and mitigating the risk of contamination, and increasing consumer access to affordable quality foods. This is particularly important in local food systems as they provide food for all economic levels of consumers. In our work at FBS and the work of our esteemed panel, we have focused on the economic impact of food SMEs over the past decades, providing services to strengthen their business model that can bolster their innovation, attract financing, as well as encourage consumer preference to their brands. Today, our webinar will bring together a panel of technical experts, some SME owners, and investors to discuss the challenges as well as the opportunities for building the capacity of food SMEs, increasing investment in the sector, and improving access to nutritious foods. Again, welcome, and I want to turn it back over now to our moderator, Sue. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Roberta, and thanks for teeing us up today. We're looking forward to a great conversation. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. The first is Dr. Marty van Leerde from the Micronutrient Forum. We also have Elizabeth West from iGravity. We have Madame Marie-André Tal she's the founder and owner of Frutales in Senegal. We have Greg Garrett with us today from the Access to Nutrition Initiative, or ATNI. And finally, we have Dr. Babacar Sene, who's the Food Enterprise Solutions representative from Senegal. My name is Sue Cloran, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. I'm a registered dietitian and Senior Vice President at Eat Well Global. We're a strategy and communications agency working within the food and health industries to accelerate positive impact on people, planet, and profits. Before we jump in, a few housekeeping items to note. This session is being recorded, and a recording link will be shared with you by email afterwards. Please note that some of our presenters and panelists are French speaking. There is the capability to live translate within Zoom. If you click on Show Captions at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to toggle on and off those captions and translations. We recommend that you go ahead and do that now, since some of the presentations, as I say, will be in French. Questions we will be taking on the chat to be answered at the end of the session. So please do submit your questions or comments to the speakers and to the panelists. And of course, as well, if you have any technical questions, you can ask them in the chat too. Before we jump in, we're going to play a short video which beautifully introduces the Micronutrient Forum. Thank you for getting this up for us.
Every child deserves a chance to flourish. The stark reality is that children are being fed to fail in low and middle income countries. Millions of children are either eating too little or eating foods lacking the important nutrients needed during early childhood, particularly between 6 to 23 months. How children are fed and nurtured in the first 2 years of life sets the foundation for their future, impacting growth, development, academic and career achievements, and lifelong health. Unfortunately, nutrient-rich diets are out of reach for over 3 billion. There are many factors impacting the problem, though food systems are a major driver and falling short of providing the safe and nutritious foods for young children. Let's hear from experts on how we can transform food systems to ensure children are nourished with safe and nutrient-dense diets.
They have small stomachs, but they are growing rapidly. So they need the right nutrients to be able to build their brains, to build up their bodies and all, and grow well. So if you provide the wrong ingredients, you have actually interfered with the growth and development of that child.
We have to think about foods, whole foods for children that are part of their family's culture and their diet. And within that context, there are situations where a nutrient supplement or fortified food product can really make a contribution. But it always has to be thought of in the context of a food-based diet that's culturally appropriate and within the context of the needs of the family and the child.
What does a nutrient-dense diet look like? While breastfeeding is a critical foundation, it's not enough once they reach 6 months old. To grow and develop, children need nutrient-rich foods like colorful fruits and vegetables, and proteins like meat, fish, and eggs, to name a few. But here's the tough part. 2 out of 3 children aged 6 to 23 months are not getting the nutrient-dense diets they need to grow, as these foods are not sufficiently available, affordable, accessible, or aspirational.
Now, what we've also heard is that food systems in general are still not yet fit to deliver these nutrients in a sustainable way to the general population, let alone to this specific age groups. Number 1 barrier is cost and affordability. Number 2 barrier is the availability of these foods in the market. So we have to make sure that food systems and the decision makers within the food systems are equipped with the knowledge so that they can help to make sure that the food systems deliver the nutrients to these children.
The barrier is actually the demand. It is very low and consumers don't understand their interest. We need to work on demand, encourage consumption, and equip the private sector to do so.
Bold initiatives are already in motion, reshaping the food systems to improve access to nutrient-dense perishable foods, as well as increase the availability of affordable, safe, and fortified packaged complementary foods. Innovative approaches such as crop biofortification, egg production hubs, or dairy distribution networks offer promising solutions in increasing access to affordable, nutritious, and safe diets of young children. Learn more about a few examples from our experts.
For small fish powder, we made sure that we identify local communities, and local communities are the ones giving us feedback as well on how we should develop this together with the private sector that we are working.
Food systems can contribute to child diets and complementary food through the promotion of African, indigenous, and underutilized crops. You know, we all know that these crops have both impact in terms of nutrition, but also in terms of climate. And for me, by using these indigenous crops, we are really creating value locally. And we are creating the link between smallholder farmers and baby, but in a more sustainable way.
Governments and policymakers must make a deliberate effort, to actually make sure that we subsidize or make these nutritious foods for children affordable to mothers. If we don't make that deliberate effort, it will not help. In the end, it ends up helping the country or the countries, because you end up with children who grow well, and in the future they can contribute to the economic and development of the country.
Let's place children at the heart of our food systems and ensure they have access to affordable, safe, and nutrient-dense foods. Doing so demands unwavering commitment to refocus food systems to fill the most critical nutrient gaps. This will require strong partnerships between governments and food producers, suppliers, and distributors to collectively address challenges around critical aspects such as reducing food loss and waste, access to technical assistance, and ensuring food safety. Success will require building capacity of farmer groups, ensuring access to quality inputs through industry associations, and monitoring compliance of regulatory standards, amongst others. Furthermore, addressing the needs and aspirations of caretakers is key to increasing demand for nutritious complementary foods for their children. Only together we can transform our food systems, unlocking a resilient future where every child eats well, thrives, and reaches their full potential.
All right, with that, we are going to head now into our first discussion, and Dr. Marty van Leerde is going to lead us through this discussion. Marty, I'm going to hand over to you, and we're going to begin discussing why local businesses are important for delivering nutritious food to consumers. Over to you.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks so much for asking to go back to the video with the sound. I think that helped. Now, I think the video already gave some of the answers, or the answers that I would give at least to the question you're asking. Why are local businesses important for delivering nutritious food to consumers? My organization, the Micronutrients Forum, is a nutrition organization, and we always focus on the most vulnerable groups of the populations. And in this case, as you could hear, it's about children under 2 years of age. And the video was made for a recent expert meeting that we organized that was entitled, How Can We Make Food Systems Work for Complementary Feeding, which is the addition of foods for children when they are also breastfed. I don't go into what was said in the video. I think it was very clear, right? Small children need really good nutrition to grow, to develop, even for educational performance and professional achievements in their later life. They have much higher nutrition needs than you and I as adults, but they have very small stomachs, and therefore the nutrients or the foods that they have need to be nutrient packed. But a lot of the foods that they're eating are not nutrient packed, or they don't have access to the ones that are, like, you know, the protein rich foods, fish, meat, but also vegetables, eggs, fruits, etc. So that is now where the SMEs come in, I believe. And they are producers of food, obviously, but also just local production. So that is what is available in local markets. And I believe that these producers need to be aware of a couple of things. First, the nutrition recommendations for populations, including those young children, recommendations that are made by governments, but also by organizations such as the World Health Organization. They need to ensure the quality and the safety of the products, obviously, but they also need to comply with some marketing guidelines, because there are always marketing guidelines. And again, for this particular younger group, they're quite specific. So there are some great examples. Some of them were mentioned in the video, and I think today we may hear other examples. But it's not just about a couple of examples. We need the entire food environment to be full of nutritious and safe foods, right? So it's not only, I think, the small and medium-sized enterprises that we need. For this vision to come to life, we really need everybody. We need the governments, obviously, the suppliers, researchers, technical agencies that work together so that we can really take a whole of systems approach. And I think that what we'll hear is that there is a need also for SMEs, to get support. I fully understand that one cannot build a market just for the needs of children under 2 years. And I also know very well as a nutritionist that nutritious and safe foods are important for the entire population. But again, I believe that it's especially this age group having these higher nutrient needs than we have adults. That's why we need to place them at the center of our attention. And that's why we have made this video. And as the video said in the end, we hope also at the center of food systems. So SMEs need to be aware, they need to apply certain recommendations, but they also need support from others active in this field. And I am very interested what others are thinking. And I know we are a little bit behind on time, but I hope that I can give the floor maybe to Greg from ATNI to see what his perspective is.
Thank you, Marty. You've said most of it, so I'll be very brief. I think the video was excellent as well. I will repeat, they're major engines of growth, SMEs, so they're key for delivering nutritious foods. The vast majority of foods produced are from SMEs, and we shouldn't forget that. And of course, I think it was mentioned, they are usually the only link between the rural farmers, the smallholder, and low-income consumers. But I wanted to bring maybe something new to the table. And that's around the fact that they should be able to, and we've seen examples of this, and I had the privilege of living in Tanzania as well as Central Asia for many years. They understand what the consumer wants better. They know what the needs are. We can help them understand that, but they usually know what the needs are. They can have more culturally appropriate foods. ATNI has been looking at packaged foods that have been imported into many low and middle income settings. And those foods that are produced by multinationals in general, if you took brand X from producer, in Europe, it's often less healthy in a low and middle income setting than that same brand in Europe. That is a huge problem. I think we should be enabling and helping small and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, or in Asia, produce culturally appropriate, micronutrient rich foods, which are healthier and more culturally appropriate than many of the imports that are available. Not to say there's not a role for imported foods, but I think this is a great opportunity. And of course, we're going to have to unlock financing to make that happen. Thanks.
Back to you, Sue. I think that we can catch up on some time here. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marty, for leading that discussion and sharing your thoughts with us. So next up, I would like to hand over to Dr. Babacar Sene to summarize the work that Food Enterprise Solutions has done with SMEs in Senegal and to introduce our second discussion topic. So over to you, Babacar.
Thank you very much, Sue. FES has implemented Food Enterprise Solution has implemented the BD4FS program, which took place over 4 years in Senegal. The objective of the program was to strengthen the capacity of agri-food SMEs with growth potential by helping them to adopt practices to produce safe and nutritious food. The main achievement of the program were provide training and technical assistance in the implementation of food safety system for more than 200 SMEs, deliver training on a prerequisite program to over 10,000 agri-food workers, disseminated message on food safety to the public, connect to food processing companies with buyers, organize public-private dialogue to discuss the issue of safe and nutritious food in Senegal, organize B2B dialogue to facilitate relation between producers, processors and distributors, support 5 SMEs to obtain financing, and finally establish a budget program for recognition after third-party audit of the effective implementation of PRPs in companies that have received the BD4FS training program. We can say the work done by FES, Food Enterprise Solution, through the BD4FS program has contributed significantly to the adoption of practices that have enabled many Senegalese businesses to produce safe and more nutritious food. I'm pleased to announce that the company Frutal, whose founder and CEO I'm going to introduce, has benefited from this program. Marie-André Tal is the CEO of Frutal, which she founded in 2005. Mrs. Tal began her professional career as a philosophy teacher for 10 years. Then she obtained a Master of Business Administration in a prestigious management school and has held senior positions in 2 industrial fisheries companies before starting her own business. Mrs. Tal was founding member and president of Africa Agro-Export Association for 12 years. She is also the first laureate of the African Women Entrepreneurship Program initiated by the former US First Lady Hillary Clinton, which permitted her to meet the US President Barack Obama during his visit in Senegal in 2013. In recognition in her immense contribution to the development of agri-food sector, the prestigious decoration of Chevalier de l'Ordre du Mérite Agricole Français was awarded to her by France. I could say more about her career, but I just stopped there to give her the floor. Madame Tal, donc c'est avec un honneur et un grand plaisir que je vais vous passer la parole pour faire votre présentation qui porte sur ce que les entreprises agroalimentaires comme Frutal doivent faire pour pouvoir donc assurer la production d'aliments sains et nutritifs. Merci. À vous la parole.
Bonjour à tous, merci Dr Sen pour cette présentation. Alors, je ne sais pas si vous voyez bien la traduction, parce que moi j'ai un petit problème avec la traduction en français, mais comme je fais le sous-titrage en anglais, j'arrive à suivre. Alors, j'espère que je serai comprise. Alors, ce que je peux dire, c'est que les besoins des entreprises pour produire et distribuer des produits alimentaires de qualité varient en fonction de leur stade de développement. On ne peut pas parler des entreprises agroalimentaires comme s'agissant de quelque chose d'indifférencié. En me limitant aux PME que je connais, opérant dans des réseaux similaires, je constate qu'elles sont principalement dirigées par des femmes résilientes qui proposent des produits alimentaires de qualité sur le marché, mais qui rencontrent encore beaucoup de difficultés. Vous savez, pour produire des aliments, il faut respecter des normes, il faut mettre en place des processus avec des équipements adéquats, il faut utiliser un emballage approprié. Cependant, l'importation d'équipements et d'emballages est souvent nécessaire en raison d'un manque de production sur le marché local. Cela soulève la question du financement à court, moyen et long terme pour ces entreprises qui se heurtent aux exigences des banques qui sont peu adaptées aux PME. Et je pense qu'un financement adéquat est absolument crucial pour le développement des entreprises agroalimentaires et pour la souveraineté alimentaire. Je pense qu'on ne peut pas dire qu'il y a nécessité de produire ce que nous consommons et en même temps ne pas créer les conditions pour que les entreprises produisent en quantité et en qualité. Beaucoup d'entreprises ne progressent pas, ne se développent pas par manque de financement adéquat. Je pense que nous avons besoin d'une politique très claire, très bien affichée de financement des entreprises agroalimentaires, quelle que soit leur taille. Une politique claire qui va se prononcer sur une baisse des taux d'intérêt et plus particulièrement sur des taux d'intérêt préférentiels pour les femmes. Aujourd'hui, les femmes sont cantonnées dans des micro-entreprises avec des micro-crédits, elles font des micro-investissements et donc des micro-profits. Et il faut que cela change, l'enjeu est extrêmement important. Un autre besoin des entreprises, c'est l'accès au marché. Et pour moi, le premier marché des entreprises, si on veut développer la consommation locale et mieux nourrir nos populations, ce sont les marchés institutionnels, ce sont les marchés de l'État. Au Sénégal, on parle beaucoup de développement des cantines scolaires, on parle de multiplier les cantines scolaires. Moi, je pense que c'est une bonne approche pour bien nourrir les enfants et que les enfants aient de bonnes habitudes de consommation de produits locaux, mais il faudrait que les appels d'offres ciblent les entreprises de transformation de produits locaux qui, du coup, vont adopter leur production à la demande, dans la mesure où il y a une demande. Et puis, pour aller vite, je dirais aussi que les entreprises ont besoin de formation et de certification. Il existe des formations, et même des formations qui sont gratuites. Beaucoup d'entreprises ont bénéficié de la formation BD4FS évoquée par le docteur Sen. Mais je dois dire que il s'agit souvent de formations standards qui s'adressent au plus grand nombre et qui ne sont pas suffisamment ciblées. Moi, je crois qu'il est temps qu'on ait une typologie des entreprises et qu'on sache très exactement, lorsqu'on propose des formations, à quelle catégorie d'entreprises on s'adresse. Les entreprises ont besoin aussi de certification. Vous savez, on ne peut pas... La certification, c'est la meilleure manière de prouver qu'on fait des produits de qualité. Or, ce qu'on remarque, c'est que la certification est calibrée pour les grosses entreprises. Donc, ce sont des certifications qui coûtent excessivement cher et une petite entreprise qui veut se lancer dans un processus de certification n'est pas sûre de pouvoir rentabiliser cela. Et donc, souvent, on reporte à plus tard parce qu'il y a d'autres priorités. Mais je pense que le sujet de la certification, c'est un sujet qui est à approfondir parce que je pense que c'est la seule manière de prouver qu'on fait des produits de qualité. Or, ça n'est pas accessible. Alors, la liste des besoins des entreprises est très longue. On peut aller dans le détail, mais j'aimerais terminer pour le moment en exprimant un sentiment. Je pense que concernant les femmes et les entreprises qui sont dirigées par des femmes, on attend qu'elles fassent des miracles avec peu de moyens. Alors, je me dis, c'est vrai qu'on fait des miracles, mais c'est justement parce que les femmes font des miracles que peut-être qu'il faut leur confier la souveraineté alimentaire et leur donner les moyens de produire en quantité des aliments de qualité. Voilà, c'est une série de remarques et j'aimerais bien répondre à vos questions si possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madam Tull. And I hope that folks were able to follow with the translation that was going live there. But I wondered, Babacar, since you teed us up for this conversation, if you have anything to jump in and add. And I can also see, Marty, you came off mute. So it's possible that you wanted to contribute something too. No, she said.
Thank you, Sue. Now it's good for me. I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any of the other panelists, would you like to jump in? Either Roberta, Elizabeth, Greg, is there anything you would like to add to that section of the conversation? No? Perfect. All right, folks, our next section, yes.
I think it's a pity if there's no reaction, because I really liked what Marie-André was saying. And, you know, being a woman, I can only say that I've, over my career in previous jobs as well, worked with female-led enterprises. And yes, I think all enterprises, small and medium-sized enterprises, need support. But I do believe that there's a lot of women that are working in this space, and they don't always have the easy access to resources, to even capacity strengthening, to finances, to TA, etc. So I think we need to do an extra effort to make it available to them. So thank you, Madame Tull, for making that remark.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marty, for jumping in. And Roberta, I can see your hand is up, so you had some comments.
Yes, thank you. Merci beaucoup, Madame Tull. I'm apologies again. My French is horrid, so I'll continue in English. I have worked with Madame Tull, though, via translator, of course, but I've been to her business and I've seen her operation. And I can tell you, she, as an SME, you know, as a small woman-owned business, she takes very seriously what she's trying to accomplish, not only to be a businesswoman and to have a successful business, but also to provide a quality product for her consumers, for her buyers. She's very dedicated. She works very hard on this, and you know, she took to heart what we as Food Enterprise Solutions was offering via the Business Drivers for Food Safety Project. And it is not easy. And she said this in some of her comments. You know, it adds to your price point for your product when you have to pay a quality management manager, when you have to improve constantly your employees' skill level, because you can't just train somebody once. You have to train them over and over. There's no company alive, there's not a multinational or anything like that that doesn't have training consistently. And so for an SME, this is an economic burden, but she's doing it. She's attracting investment because of this. She has a wonderful business plan, and she's implemented, you know, food safety and food quality and couched it in her business plan. And she's, you know, I commend her for doing all this hard work. It hasn't been easy. It is a struggle for SMEs. And I would just like to thank her for all of her hard effort. And back to you. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks for your comments there, Bert. And Madam Tull, we certainly appreciate the work that you are doing. So we're going to transition next into some short videos which are about the badge program. And this program really validates that the SME is practicing global standards for food safety. So Abison, if you wouldn't mind cueing those videos for us, thank you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Madame Haniba, fondatrice de la société Didi Africa agroalimentaire. Je suis très honorée aujourd'hui de recevoir mon badge Food Safety de l'audit de l'externe de l'USAID. Vraiment, je suis très honorée parce que ce badge me permet d'être beaucoup plus conforme en sécurité sanitaire des aliments pour mes produits qui sont le yaourt et les caillés, les jus locaux tels que le citron, le bissap, le bouille, le moringa, ces produits dont leurs qualités nutritives ne sont plus à démontrer. Donc, je suis vraiment honorée, vraiment, et ce badge de l'USAID est vraiment impactant dans la mesure où ces produits sont naturels et ça permet à la population sénégalaise de consommer sain pour leur santé. Ça permet aussi de réduire les pertes d'aliments parce que nous nous approvisionnons au niveau des fermes qui pratiquent l'agriculture raisonnée, sans pesticides et sans produits chimiques. Ça attire toute la chaîne de valeur sénégalaise et c'est impactant pour l'économie du pays. C'est le développement durable, c'est zéro perte, c'est vraiment très bien, c'est un bon badge qui nous permettra de mieux nourrir sainement notre population. L'USAID et Didi Africa nourrissent sainement la population sénégalaise.
Merci beaucoup pour ce badge que nous avons gagné. Ce badge de l'USAID BTKFS nous permettra de mieux asseoir nos produits, qui sont des produits locaux, sur le marché et de donner des produits de sécurité sanitaire, alimentaire à nos clients. Ce badge donc nous permettra également d'aller de l'avant parce que nous allons continuer à mettre en pratique ce que nous avons appris à partir de ce badge-là. Ainsi, nos produits nebedaï, gingembre, quinqueliba au clou de girofle pourront avoir encore une meilleure qualité pour satisfaire la clientèle locale. Et nous allons projeter dans l'avenir pour la suite en ayant un œil vers l'international.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Abison, for pulling those up for us. And we're going to move the feed directly really into our third topic of discussion. And Marty, it's again you on the hot seat. You're going to lead us through this. And we're going to be discussing the question, what do policymakers or regulators need to do better to support effectiveness of businesses in delivering safe, nutritious food? So we're going to zoom in really on those policymakers and regulators. So Marty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sue. And be assured, I will also give the floor to Babacar, to Madame Tull, and then you let us know if there's other time for someone else. I think this is a really big point because there's multiple policy and regulatory hurdles, and we already heard some of that. Last year, we brought together in several instances some experts to discuss the topic, and that led to a number of recommendations specifically for what governments can do. And I would like to mention some of those. The first thing that was mentioned is really that governments in general have national food-based dietary guidelines. And they, however, are for the general population and do not include specific guidance for complementary foods for children. So we recommend that they include that. But those guidelines, I think, also are helpful for the SMEs, looking at it on what is that government saying is important for a nutritious and safe diet. And part of that is also the development and the enforcement of standards for food safety, food fortification, for that matter, as well as nutrition labeling, that we give the right information to the consumers. That, I think, is vital to provide clarity and give guidance to businesses if the government set those standards. It will help improving the food quality, but it will also, I believe, help in creating a level playing field amongst the different businesses. Because if some follow guidance, but others don't, that is not very encouraging for the ones that are trying to do the best here. A second point could be that governments can implement policies that offer subsidies for the purchase of nutritious foods. And that could be through social protection programs, for instance, that in general target the poor or the ultra poor households to give them more access to nutritious foods. Those type of subsidies, I don't actually know an example in Africa, but there are definitely some examples that I know of in Asia. And then the third point I want to bring is that I do believe that governments should both support as well as strengthen or set boundaries for collaboration between public and private sector. It's really important that there are subsidies, but also incentives for the producers of nutritious complementary foods. That can be for instance, an import taxation waiver for premixes, vitamin mineral premixes, or it could be an advanced market commitment to producers. And the example I want to give, I don't know if it's still happening, but a couple of years ago, for instance, in Rwanda, the Africa Improved Foods is a company that produces foods for children, for pregnant women. And they have an agreement with the government of Rwanda as well as with World Food Programme. Those type of, I would say, agreements are an investment and are reducing the risks of companies. And I think that that is what governments could be doing. So I don't want to talk all by myself. Babacar, I would like to give you maybe the floor first. And then if you can hand over to Marianne Retal, if that is okay with you, Sue? We have enough time?
Yes, absolutely. Go for it.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that the budget program put in place by Food Enterprise Solution is a compensation for the recognition deficit that Mrs. Stahl spoke about in her presentation. It was really a veritable success because it permit to some SMEs to get another market. What I want to add concerning the regulation here in Senegal, we have lack in regulation related to food, especially nutritious and safe and safety. But we have also a national agency, the standard national agency ISN, that develop many standards about food nutrition and food safety, but the problem is generally these standards are not at the disposition of the food business operator. It is the main problem, and I think we have to develop communication to because the veritable problem is the lack of the communication in the. But we had many standards concerning nutritious food and safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abison. Madam Tal, would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Oui, tout a été bien dit, mais j'aimerais ajouter quelques petites choses. J'aimerais dire qu'il y a beaucoup d'initiatives, beaucoup de mesures, mais il n'y a pas vraiment une politique concertée, mise en place pour produire en quantité et en qualité des aliments. Ça, c'est une nécessité. Et pour moi, déjà, généralement, elles commencent l'activité dans leur maison, dans des zones qui ne sont pas adaptées à la production alimentaire. Et donc, on parle beaucoup de zones industrielles. J'aimerais justement que dans cette politique qui va mettre en place, qu'il y ait un accès privilégié des entreprises alimentaires et des entreprises dirigées par des femmes dans ces zones industrielles. Dès qu'il y a du financement, dès que l'activité devient importante, vous ne voyez plus les femmes. Les femmes, on les cantonne vraiment à un niveau d'activité de subsistance pratiquement. C'est inconcevable. Ensuite, j'aimerais dire que ça existe dans d'autres pays, pourquoi pas au Sénégal, une banque vraiment dédiée à l'activité agroalimentaire où toutes les questions de taux d'intérêt, de garantie, etc., sont posées, où on trouve des solutions à cela. Actuellement, le fait qu'on soit livré à nous-mêmes et que les banques traditionnelles ne sont pas intéressées par nous, ça pose un problème. Ça crée un vide et ce vide doit être comblé si on est d'accord qu'il nous faut souveraineté alimentaire. Ensuite, je dirais aussi qu'on importe beaucoup d'équipements et d'emballages. Et les taxes sur les équipements et les emballages sont extrêmement élevées. Peut-être que pour permettre un décollage des activités, il est pendant une période nécessaire de réduire ces taxes parce qu'il est inconcevable que les confitures qui sont importées et qu'on trouve dans nos supermarchés coûtent moins cher que les confitures que nous produisons là, qui sont confitures naturelles, sans conservateurs, sans colorants, etc., et qui sont des confitures de bonne qualité. Ça, c'est nos taxes qui font que les ne sont pas vraiment rentables. Et je pense que même si ça n'est pas très populaire de ça, quand même qu'il y ait une protection de la production locale. Et puis, j'aimerais dire aussi que s'il n'y a pas d'aliments transformés, s'il n'y a pas de production de matières premières. Et je pense qu'on fait beaucoup de choses pour les producteurs, mais moi, je regarde dans mon secteur où je travaille beaucoup le piment. Je vois que mes producteurs de piment, ils ont des problèmes de semences, ils ont énormément de problèmes de production au niveau des process, etc. Finalement, ils sont livrés à eux et ça a l'air d'être anecdotique le piment, mais en fait, tout le monde mange du piment et c'est un produit grand. Et du coup, moi, je trouve que les producteurs sont un peu... s'il y a un accompagnement de l'État pour qu'il y ait plus de production de matières premières, on n'atteindra pas nos objectifs. Donc, il faut se pencher vraiment sur la production en quantité et en qualité de matières premières. C'est important. Voilà, je vais m'en arrêter là parce qu'on peut dire beaucoup de choses, effectivement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your comments, Madam Tull. And thank you, Marty, for leading that section for us as well. We are running a little behind time, so we're going to move on to our next section. Before we do, please don't forget that you can add your questions to the chat, and we will try to get to them at the end of this webinar, time permitting. But that takes us through to the next section, which is another poll for you all. This time we're going to share the results with you after the poll has completed. But the question is, what are the main constraints for investors to identifying good investment opportunities in SMEs? You've got multiple choice options there. Please do vote on your screen, and then we will give you a couple of minutes to do that. Interesting. So we have a leader there, access to information for both investors and SMEs. And let's see if we can unpack that a little bit in our topic number 4, which is the conversation we're going to go into. So the next discussion topic is, what criteria do investors use in lending to or investing in SMEs working in the food sector? What do SMEs need to do to meet their criteria? And Elizabeth, you haven't really spoken with us much yet in this webinar, so you're going to lead us through this discussion, and thank you so much for doing so, and handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Sue. So just as a little caveat before I get started, I do think that kind of food and agriculture can be considered a sector, but ultimately it's composed of a lot of different types of companies with a lot of different business models, which may have different criteria. I think a primary producer is a little bit different from a cannery and these sorts of things. And also just to note that I'm speaking from the perspective of a lender. So my company manages a couple of different loan facilities that make direct debt in SMEs in sub-Saharan Africa, some of which are in the agricultural sector. And our criteria are different from an organization that might be providing equity capital, which is a longer term capital, or venture debt, or supporting startups. So just to be clear, kind of where we are coming from in the eligibility criteria for agri SMEs. But I think just kind of going back to some of the comments that Mrs. Tull said, most agricultural SMEs tend to be more informal, and sometimes they can be family companies as well. And they're based in rural areas oftentimes also. And that, going back to the poll, makes it a little bit more difficult sometimes to get accurate information about business operations. And we do find that to be one of the largest challenges that we face as investors and other investors face as well. So just in terms of a few things that we're focusing on, again, as lenders, and so we're normally coming in a bit later stage in a company's development cycle, but we are looking for companies that have, a 2 to 3 year track record of positive business operations. So, it's already a company that is generating revenues, possibly have already reached profitability, or is generally at a break-even stage. And then really has enough financial information that allows us to either reconstruct the financial history of the company, or they have audited management accounts, which is a really big cost to a small business like these. But ultimately, in order to assess the feasibility of a loan, you have to be able to better understand the 2 or 3 year financial history of a company. And we find that to be a major challenge just on the accounting, organization, and information front. And then we're also looking for companies that aren't already overly indebted, which I think can be a bit hard to find as well. So I think companies do have a history of borrowing from friends and family, and then maybe they're going to start to borrow from a very small bank loan with a high interest rate, and then they're looking for an even larger loan. But if they haven't had this history of profitability, then maybe they're having a debt to equity ratio, which makes increasing the amount of money they're borrowing kind of even more dangerous for the company, and it makes them difficult to lend to. And then a few other things is just kind of looking on an impact side, looking at the agricultural practices or the agroecological practices of the company, labor practices, kind of the gender, as Ms. Tall pulled out as well. Those are all things that we're looking for to make sure that the company is really well-rounded in its operations. I think in regards to kind of what could food sector SMEs do to attract investment capital, I think Greg will probably speak to that as well in a minute. I would personally really, I hate to kind of hammer this home, but I'd really focus on, financial acumen and record keeping, because I think that that's just a key barrier for investors. I would also, try to really kind of do a few things that can help improve the risk profile of a company when investors are looking at it. So there's options in regards to having multiple product lines. So instead of being a single product company, that can be really risky, especially in this time of climate change. If you have a single product and maybe you're only sourcing from one region, the risk that you're going to have climate related issues is rather high and a bit difficult to mitigate against. Or, having something like contract-based sales, which I understand is difficult as well, but, having that kind of, established market of kind of larger off-takers that you more or less know will be purchasing from these agri SMEs, that can give a lender a little bit of comfort in making a loan and knowing that there's going to be customers on the other end to kind of, purchase the goods. So maybe I'll pause here because I think we're, kind of coming to our end of time. I just did also want to make one note between something that Ms. Tall and something that Marty said as well, is that I do think that the role of banks is something that we often discuss in impact investing and how they're so risk adverse and how they won't really lend to agri SMEs. And I think that's an area where governments could potentially get more involved in seeing if there's a way to facilitate local lending, because ultimately I think it's a bit of a shame that as a foreign lender, we're coming in and lending to small agri SMEs in rural areas because banks just aren't interested in doing such things. But back over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and so helpful to hear your commentary on the subject. I wonder if any of the other panelists would like to jump in with their thoughts at this moment. I can see Roberta, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to react to your comments and totally agree with everything you're saying, Elizabeth. We actually did the exact same. We used the criteria that you just described. Madame Tall's company, Portales, et cetera. They had to have a business plan. They have to, have some level of revenue generation. They have to have a brand, et cetera, to be able to join the investment group that we started under Business Drivers for Food Safety. We have 5 companies that we pulled in lenders to the total of almost $6 million. One of them was a local bank, by the way, and I take your comment. You're right. Banks, should be offering financial services and products that are affordable to SMEs, more affordable. So just wanted to jump in and have that part of the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Greg, I would like to now hand it over to you to lead us through our final topic of discussion today, which is related to this one that we've just covered. But what can be done to better connect food SMEs to these lenders and to investors? I'd like you to lead us through that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Sue. I thought that I'd like to restate the problem by actually explaining a real SME case that I got to know when I was living in Tanzania. I'll just change the name because I didn't ask them that I could use this. But I thought this example is what you see time and again, at least what my experience has been. So let's call the company Tanzania Fresh. I've known the managing director for 6 years, since 2018. and met with her in June of last year to get an update. And I mean, their business model and what they produce is exactly what we need more of, but they have a problem accessing finance. So roughly, what they're doing is fortified flour using biofortified crops like vitamin A, biofortified maize. So that's excellent. They also have a line of packaged fortified porridges where they're adding B vitamins and iron, and they have stated as their mission to improve not only access to nutritious food among children, but also to make this link between low-income consumers and the market through affordable food. So everything's great. So what's the problem? Well, for the 6 years I've known this company, they've been unable to scale. They've hit a certain point where they cannot find the 500 to 800,000 USD is what they feel they need of debt financing to buy capital. It's a capital expenditure for equipment. Basically, it's milling equipment, it's packaging equipment, things that they need to really go to scale. And they know the demand is there, but it's the unfavorable lending conditions in that particular country, the whole region really, including the high interest rates, short repayment terms. They can't really use the local banks. And meanwhile, you have all kinds of agri-food funds that exist, but they're really just investing in larger ticket sizes or equity or some other kind of financing mechanism. So I think this company really represents what we're calling, what is often referred to as the missing middle of finance. So to conclude what the solutions would be, because that was the question for this problem of missing middle finance, I think three things. One, what Elizabeth said quite rightly, I think what we heard time and again is these companies need technical support, especially around their financial management, to attract the investor, because they usually won't have that. That's not something they would naturally put in place when they're especially a small enterprise. So we can help them with that as a development community. Secondly is, I guess loosely you could call it any kind of catalytic capital and de-risking mechanism. So first loss guarantees are super helpful. They usually are paid for by donors or development finance institutions, and they can help attract loans from local banks. And they might cover the first 30%, for example, and help mitigate some of the risk around defaults and things. And the third area, I would say, and this is something we're trying to do at Access to Nutrition Initiative with others, is let's have alignment on what is a healthy food and how you measure that, and make sure that when you set up an agri-food fund, where you're talking to an impact investor, you're talking to a donor, you're speaking the same language, because a lot of people think they know, what they mean by nutritious, but there's not a strong definition out there. And most of the agri-food funds that exist, they invest in equity, in gender, in livelihoods, in very important topics, but not necessarily nutrition. They're not measuring outcomes related to nutrition. So we need better metrics and better measurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Are there any panelists who would like to comment on what Greg has just shared with us?
Just maybe just say where Greg is, or the last comment he said, what are the, how do we define nutritious foods? What are the metrics? I think that's where I started, where the nutrition community should indeed be a little bit more clear sometimes on, for instance, the complementary foods, right? What is the recommended composition of the complementary foods for that age group, 6 to 23 months? So there's some guidance, but basically we still need to make maybe a step with Codex Alimentarius, and but I definitely think that with that remark we're making the loop. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marty. And that does bring us to the end of the topics that we wanted to go through today. So please do drop your questions into the chat. We're going to enter into a period of Q&A at this time to wrap up the webinar. So we have had a few questions come through, but again, please add your questions if you have them. And we're going to walk through them. So Babacar, this first one is for you. And it's around the management of food waste. And the question is really, we believe that the food process should include the management of food waste and organic food waste. organic waste is a great contribution to climate change because of the emissions of methane. And I wonder if you would be able to comment on that for us or share your thoughts with us, please.
Concernant la question qui a été posée, à savoir le management, la place du management donc, dans le fait d'avoir des produits qui sont sûrs, donc je pense que c'est quelque chose de très important et même de très central. Les entreprises doivent donc mettre en place des systèmes de management qui sont capables donc de gérer la qualité et la sécurité des produits et donc la qualité nutritionnelle. Ça me semble être un aspect crucial pour donc pouvoir mettre sur le marché des produits qui sont sûrs et de très bonne qualité. C'est ça.
Thank you, Babacar. And actually, we had a related question come through in the chat regarding mangoes, specifically the fruit mangoes. And, you know, the participant would like to know if there is a lot of food waste in fruits like mangoes as well. Would you be able to talk to that?
Les déchets dans la mangue, ça dépend du produit que tu en fais. Donc, si vous voulez faire de la... c'est les déchets organiques. En général, quand on fait, par exemple, des purées de mangue, ce qui n'est pas comestible dans la mangue, c'est la peau et, bien entendu, le noyau. Sinon, la mangue est un fruit très charnu qui a un bon rendement et ce qui est à jeter, c'est juste le noyau et la peau qu'on ne mange pas. Donc, il n'y a pas beaucoup de déchets. On peut dire que il n'y a pas beaucoup de déchets en ce qui concerne la mangue. Voilà ce que je peux dire. Madame Tal, si vous voulez ajouter quelque chose, je ne vois pas autre chose de déchet autre que le noyau et la peau. Merci.
Je veux bien ajouter que souvent, concernant nos produits, peut-être qu'il y a de la valorisation des déchets comme la peau et le noyau à faire. Il y a des essais timides, mais il faudrait vraiment développer ça, développer l'innovation. Et puis, j'aimerais dire aussi que concernant les mangues, souvent on a des variétés qui ne se prêtent pas toujours aux transformations qu'on voudrait faire. Donc peut-être qu'il faut aussi travailler sur la production et sur les variétés à développer. Merci.
Ok, j'ai ajouté juste que pour le noyau, l'amande, il y a des entreprises qui exploitent l'amande, qui font une production l'amande est bien transformée et je pense qu'ils extraient de l'huile d'amande de mangue. Voilà, donc l'amande est valorisée. Hein. Mais je parlais tout à l'heure par rapport à la comestibilité, mais l'amande est bien valorisée. Merci.
Thank you very much to both of you for covering that question for us. We have another question that came in the chat, which is, can anyone share information about the extent that these programs with quality badges build awareness amongst target consumers about the badge, its value, and where to find these certified foods? Bert, I'm going to ask you to take this question if that's okay with you.
Sure, happy to, Sue. Thank you very, very much. I need to explain a little bit about the validation program. The validation program is not a certification program, okay? This is a validation of the training that the SMEs received, all based on international standards, of course. And it's validating that they implemented all of what the international standards are, like, you know, a GAP, good ag practices, good manufacturing practices, good hygiene practices, good processing practices, employee training, etc. And so that's what the validation badge is all about. We're coming to the end of our project now, and we're just starting to collect the data on how much consumer preference this has built. But if you use the examples from countries that do have validation, voluntary validation, like the US, like the UK, other places in the world, consumers prefer that there is something that says this company did something to ensure that the food is safer. There's no such thing as 100% safe food, but it's safer. And the companies in Senegal all made very concerted efforts to embrace this. They are reporting back qualitatively that there is an increase in consumer preference of their product, but we have not yet had an opportunity to quantify. Thanks.
But thank you so much for your comments on the topic. And that does bring us to the end of today's webinar. And I'm going to pass over to Russ Webster, who has been behind the scenes, but absolutely critical in producing this webinar today. So thank you, Russ, and over to you for our closing comments.
Thanks very much. And I want to thank everyone for your participation. My name is Russ Webster. As Sue mentioned, I'm the President and CEO of Food Enterprise Solutions. Today, as was discussed by the panelists, SMEs are critical for food systems to be able to deliver safe and nutritious food choices to all consumers. Through the work that we've done, we've learned that they are eager for training to strengthen their operations and their quality management systems. They are also willing to invest in adopting better practices and technologies. And as was just discussed about the badge program, they want recognition for their efforts. And they want recognition that they can use to boost their brand in the marketplace and to improve their ability to attract financing and capital investment. Just as a side note, one of the SMEs that we worked with in Senegal who received the badge, which acknowledged and validated their practices, said very clearly that they will use that as part of their effort to attract financing and capital. So the incentive for the badge, it also feeds into and supports the incentive for capital to grow these food enterprises. I just want to ask you all, please, to stay in touch with your recommendations and suggestions about building the capacity of these growing food businesses to provide safe, nutritious foods for all consumers. We are planning to hold some additional webinars because we feel that this topic needs more attention from donors, from investors, and from governments and everyone involved in supporting the growth of businesses that help provide nutrition to consumers. And we want to welcome and encourage your ongoing involvement. Finally, I just want to say thank you to our panelists, Marie-Andre, Marty, Elizabeth, Greg, Babacar, Roberta, and of course, Sue, for doing a great job of moderating. So thank you all. I really appreciate you taking the time to participate, and let's keep in touch and keep pushing forward on this important agenda of SMEs and their role in delivering safe, nutritious foods for all consumers. Thanks, everyone.